are now in this party office of the Finnish Social Democratic Party. The party is almost 120 years old. So in next year we are going to have the anniversary in next August. So there are plenty of traditions in the party. We are having approximately, I think, 30,000 members in the party, and we are represented in the parliament. There are 200 seats in the parliament, and now we have a group there which is consisting 35 members of the parliament. So day after tomorrow having a new elections in Finland, and I hope that we are able to reach a position as the biggest party in Finland, which could bring us maybe from 44 to 49 seats, hopefully. But it's of course very much unclear because most of the people have not decided whom they are going to vote, and my estimate is only based on these Gallup polls which has been done among the audience during this last week's time. But the situation is very exciting, and we are not sure what, of course, shall happen. But we are doing our best in these last 2 days of campaigning, and I'm confident that the work of many candidates, we're having 216 candidates for these 200 seats, and I think their work will be efficient also in the field during these last days. Just 2 days before elections, it's relatively difficult to answer completely to the question because of course we are not even knowing for sure that we are going to end in a position. By the Constitution of Finland, the tradition is that the party which is gaining the most support among the audience, so are going to end in the parliament to have the biggest group as an amount of MPs, members of the parliament. They have been given by the other groups of the parliament a possibility to try to build up a government. But it's also at the same time in the constitution there is that if you are willing to build up a majority government, then you should have the other parties by the majority to join you. So you are not able to of course you are theoretically able to put up a minority government, but when, example, in end of November, early days of December, all the years, there shall be vote of the next year's budget, then if you are willing to have the next year budget to go through from the parliament, you should have the majority of the votes there. So I think it's relatively, it's quite evident that all the governments which are willing to be functional, they should have the support from the majority in parliament. The question is that tradition probably in Finland has been that we have not had this type of two blocks policy, which has been in Sweden, example, that there has been social democratic government with, example, the support of the Greens. We have always had coalitions which have been maybe the Centre Party and us, or the Conservative Party and us. Some occasions there has been also the Greens and Left Alliance and Swedish People's Party, which are smaller parties to take part in this government. So always I think there is need to have coalition government. And this period there was also pure bourgeois government with Centre Party, with National Coalition Party, which is Liberal Conservative Party, and with these True Finns, now called Blue, because it's split before these elections, and now this part of this, the Finns party, which maintain their position in the government, which is now called the Blue Alternative, they have only maybe less than 1% support among audience, and this part of which split from this party, they are now trying to regain the same level of support among the audience, and I think if we are going to be able to end as a position to the biggest party, then the ordinary system is that the party, and in this case we are going to give we are going to introduce a list of questions, maybe not so many questions, maybe 5 to 10 maximum, and ask the other parties that how do you see example, the question theoretically could be that how do you see what Finland should do or or which methods should we use to take this climate change in control? And then the parties should introduce their ideas, and then the person and the party who is trying to build up a government, they look all the answers and look that, well, these are similar with these parties, we are maybe able to govern together because we see which should be or what should be done in next governmental period. That shall take maybe a couple of days when the questions are being given, and then so it's some kind of first round of only trying to investigate which are the feeling inside different parties, and then after some weeks the parliament is then, if there is majority is united, they are going to give to one person a possibility to try to build the government, and then the negotiations will start officially. Of course, it's possible that the party leaders are somehow in contact to each other to clarify things, but so there is also an official process of negotiating with, so the negotiators are going to gather in one house, or it's so-called House of Estates, which is in Helsinki, to spend time and debate and discuss and draw so-called governmental program. There could be several working groups to do that, where there are representation from all the parties which are taking part in these negotiations. And if then this process is successful, so that the coalition is able to find consensus that this is the political lines which we are willing to introduce within also the frame of the budget frame for the 4 years term, so that which is the amount of money you are going to spend to different issues during the time. So it's quite a complicated process at same time, but it's an important one to keep the government's ability to have the work successful the whole term. And it's very difficult to say. I think the tradition has often been that those parties which are losing a lot normally has been a weaker position, I mean, who are losing the most of the seats in the parliament relatively, they are in a weaker position in this negotiation process, and of course they feel themselves also maybe that they are not willing, I mean that they think that, example, it happened to us in 1991 when we lost seats in parliament. Then the party council only decided that we are not going to so we are not going to even go to the negotiations, because we think that we should make a we should renew our own working methods and how you see, and we should do that. But it was, as I said, almost 30 years ago. So that was probably an exceptional time also for our party. But example, if the prime minister party is losing a lot, I can imagine that in the internal debates there will be questioned that are we enough strong to go participate in the government. So I think there are two factors behind this phenomenon that we are now, according to the polls, the biggest party. The first one is that this bourgeois government, so right-wing government, has been to the people, they have not liked the policy which the government has made. So there has been weakening of the positions of the public sector workers. There is a special so-called summer loan. You shall have an half a month loan extra during the summer months, and the government has decided to cut in the public sector employees this summer loan, which has meant that especially those, example, one-parent family with a low income from the public sector, it has meant that they have saw this created a situation where they have, I put it very concretely, that they have explained their children that there is no money to go and have a holiday, which means that in this traditional type of austerity policy, I mean cutting from the state budget, you could do it in many ways. You can do it in a ways that it's more difficult for the people to find that out. But if you are making these type of issues that in every summer you saw it in your own wallet or pocket, that you are lacking some resources to do the things which are, you feel that are necessary, then you get bitter, of course. They have also tried to introduce weakening of the labor conditions without, there is a tradition in Finland to have a so-called three-party negotiation system, so that the trade unions and the employers organizations have negotiated about the working conditions and the loan levels, but when there has been not found within their negotiations agreement of certain weakening of the working conditions for the workers, then the government has said, okay, if you are not ready to find a solution, we are doing it by the majority of the parliament within the legislation, which has then meant that, of course, many who are belonging to the trade unions think that this is not fair, that someone is without their acceptance saying that we are going to weakening. One example of that, which is not directly harmed for the working people, but has harmed, for example, for those who have lost their work, has been the cutting of the social benefits for those who are unemployed, so that if they are not able to get a new work during a 3-month period, and there has been a cut of the social security of 5% approximately for them, and again and again after 3 months period of, and people have felt that this is unfair if there are no open working places for them. It's another case, of course, if there are plenty of possibilities to go to work and you deny to go, that then it's somehow understandable that this type of encouragement has been given. But if there is no possibility to do that, then it's of course unfair from the audience's angle. The third element maybe has been, like I said, the austerity policy, so the budget cuttings in the state budget from the education and also a little bit from the science, which has meant that, for example, vocational schools students, which have normally had 5 days a week, possibility to have a teacher to be with them, there has been only, example, 3 days schooling for them, and 2 days only that they have themselves has had a task to do some projects, which have meant that, of course, it's much weaker, the quality of the education which you saw in a daily life. Actual reason was that they cut 800 billion euros from the state budget, from this education field. And the thing, I think, which made it so clear was that just before last elections, all the parties and also these governmental parties, they openly show, which it was a campaign of the students' movement, they make videos where all the politicians promised that I'm not going to cut from the education if I'm going to be elected. So it was that you ruined your somehow trustworthiness among the younger generations when you do the cutting, even that you have just promised before the last elections that you are not going to do that. We have, of course, all the time said that that is wrong, and try to say that these are investments for the future. Then the fourth element maybe is this elderly care thing. You maybe have heard that there was we may call it a scandal 2 months ago in Finland, that the quality of the elderly care homes was not in a level which it should be, and most of the cases which were come to the media or reported to the media of this bad quality treatment was done by the private sector organized elderly care homes, so that the elderly people did not receive a treatment and service which was needed for them. We immediately, when it came out, because we have always said that it's an important field, said that we need a special ratio, so that there should be the ratio should be 0.7 for one elderly, that he or she should have that ratio amount of service people, which does not mean that there is almost one people serving one elderly, but because there are 24 hours, so it's 3 shifts, so it's not really a high standard. I mean, a standard which you are not able to reach. But when we said that, I think there was, when the scandal broke, there was maybe 1 or 2 weeks time when the bourgeois parties, and especially the National Coalition Party, which is the party which is holding the Ministry for Finance, they was very stubborn over the issue, and I think that made and neglected completely that there is need to do this type of real classified improvements, so that, example, put this ratio 0.7 personnel to serve one elderly during the day. And I think that made also a failing to the older generation, that these bourgeois parties were not willing to introduce in future good quality service for them. And we, of course, announce all the time for the audience that we should put resources there. So this is more maybe the what's it, 6th element. The 7th element is probably that we have tried to describe that this global warming is a problem which we should as fast as possible react and do actions, real actions. And I think that has given some kind of solid background for us among the younger generations, because they feel, of course, more and more this I think in a global scale we have seen demonstrations all around the world over the issue, and there was also some traditional parties and conservative parties who have tried to say that, well, there is not so much need to do over these issues to cut the CO2 emissions and to reach the Paris Agreement goals. We have said that we should be carbon free until 2035, so that we are not putting any CO2 emissions into the air to avoid this, or to keep the global warming in a scale of 1.5 degrees, example. So this is the issue which I think we have tried to take in our hands and show to the audience that we are having the view how we should improve our activity to fight this very important problems for whole humankind and its existence in this planet. It's a very good question. I think when it has been raised for us that should we really do these things, and should we change our behaving in these creating CO2 emissions, and especially when there was discussions about how individuals could organize their transport in future, so that are you able to have, example, your own private car, which is very, you feel it's a very private thing to think. But we have said that, of course, our goal is to have these type of engines to the cars which are not producing any CO2 emissions. So the fuel could be whatever it could be. I mean, of course, we are having electricity today. We could have biomass as an raw material, for example, gas, and we could have natural gas, and we even could have maybe in future, example, hydrogen. It's not introduced yet in commercial manner, but I think there are several possibilities to do the change. The other question, of course, is how we are then sharing the costs, and which is the ability level to adapt in those groupings in society which are maybe low-income group, or that they are not having just at that time and this type of resources when you need to buy a car. Example, young families, which are many have an interest to, example, buy a flat or do the investments which are needed when you are building your own life. And we have said that we should do this transition period in a fair manner, so that state should and could have some kind of involvement in there. And one concrete element could be that when there is in Finland a system that some of the companies are providing cars for their employees if they are, example, in medium or high leadership level in their company, so that these cars after 2 or 3 years could go back to the markets, so that the so-called other persons could buy them with a cheaper price, which was when they were new. So this type of I think there is plenty of variety of elements which could be used in introducing this fair method of this transition. But that's very important question, and that's the thing which we are only beginning or starting. We should be very innovative and try to find solutions so that all do have possibility. But it's also a quite global challenge. I mean, we should, if we are really interested to do the cutting of the CO2 emissions, we should do investments and improve the ability of many regions where the adaptation is. It could be maybe per CO2 ton, it could be quite a cheap investment if you count it relatively, but you need also resources maybe from industrialized countries like South Korea, like Europe, like US to get this move going on. Example, in part of Asia, I have heard in Indonesia there are, example, you could make larger areas of certain types of swarms, which could then adapt the CO2 emissions, but there is need to change the system so that, for example, the forest industry is not cutting and not drying those huge swarms there in Indonesia. And I think in even the Asian societies and maybe hopefully European Union could somehow introduce some even programs to have really cost-effective methods to cut or to try to decrease the amount of CO2 emissions in the hemisphere, which is very challenging. I mean, if we are looking at the problem in an old scale, it's a huge. We are not able to only do it, example, by changing our methods of consumption, but we probably need at the same time use the ability of this globe and its terrain to adapt the CO2 emissions away from this hemisphere. There is, and actually I have been myself active there. That's why I have been first coming as a worker for the party. So I was active during 1918s there. I ended as a vice chairman of the youth organization, but that's, as I said, almost 35 years ago, something like that. So but I remember I was active 10 years there. I started very early when I was 15, and then when I was 25, I thought after 10 years that I'm too old to be here, that I have been here so long that I should give room for the younger generation to come. Now it looks a little bit different. I mean, of course, we all understand that 25 years is not so old, but so I hope, and I have always said to them who are now active in the youth movement, that you should always take care, if you are somewhere 23, 25, that you should encourage those 15, 17, 18 years to come, the new generation to come, because if you're not doing that, then we are not going to have the future. So I hope they have, and I'm sure they have understood that. And as I said, I think there is really potential in this. I have a 20 years old son and 17 years daughter, and they every day put to me so difficult questions to answer, so that I see it's easy to recognize that the generation is completely another level like we were 30 years ago. also from that reason, I'm very optimistic about the future of the globe, even that the challenge is huge. But I think there are really coming generations who are good